Okay, I have a pretty small family. I'm an only child. My parents were older when they had me. My mother was probably late 30s. My dad was in his 40s. I grew up with my grandmother. Well, my mother was from St. Charles, Missouri. My grandmother, according to her information on one of those genealogy websites, was from Bavaria. My father was from Germany, Russia. His family's all from there. So Eastern Europe. My dad traveled a lot, and he represented clothing and clothing samples so that people could actually make clothes with his materials. So he was like a manufacturer's rep. And my mother, for the most part, didn't work. She started working when I got older. She worked in a psychiatrist's office and typed. So she did a lot of, I think it was called dictaphone stuff. She pushed a button with her leg and she typed. We were
When
very,
you
very liberal Jews. We went to synagogue on high holidays. I didn't fast, and that was what a lot of Jews did. And we also, I remember, had people over for Christmas Hanukkah dinner. I remember that. The neighbors came over, and I went to high holiday services around Hanukkah. But we weren't very religious. I was confirmed. It's kind of your the equal to graduating high school. You go to religious school and you learn all about the Jewish religion, which quite frankly I tuned it out because I didn't want to go. And then you're confirmed, and there's a ceremony for that. It's not the same as being bar mitzvahed or bat mitzvahed. That's much more rigorous. Some of my relatives spoke Yiddish because that's developed in Eastern Europe. They spoke some Yiddish, and I know some Yiddish probably from picking it up from them. I think my grandfather, okay, I think my grandfather was 25 years older than my grandmother. I think that she was like they met through the mail. I don't think it was like where you meet somebody and you court them and you fall in love. I think it was
mail order
like, I
bride.
hate to say it, mail order. I also heard that my grandmother grew up in a convent. She came over in the late 1800s with her cousin.
Was
Um,
your grandmother Jewish?
yes, yes, Eastern
Oh, but she
European.
grew up in a
Well,
convent?
that's what I heard, that she was raised by nuns.
Okay, that's
And
really
I
interesting.
know, and I don't know who to check this with except my cousin Bob. But we're talking in the late 1800s. She was like 12 or 15 when she came over. Okay, I grew up in an older house that was it had a Spanish flavor. I only remember my room when it was changed in the 60s or 70s. Because actually, I left the house in 68 for college. So it was remodeled in the 60s. And you walk in, my bed is on the left side, and I had this, what do you call these things? Like a treasure, like a chest, but it was like linoleum or something was covering it. And I put my toys in that was in the foot of my bed.
It's called a
Yeah,
chest.
and my dog slept on it. I remember my dog slept on the chest with me or at the foot of my bed. And on the right side of my room was all built-ins. It was a built-in desk. Everything was like one line of built-ins. Little dresser thing. And in the back was my closet. I was very lucky. It was a portable color TV. But I liked hanging out in the living room and sitting on my brown couch. I have pictures of this, by the way. And I loved watching 77 Sunset Strip. That was my favorite show. I was addicted to it. Yeah, I was very excited about that show. And I loved being with my dog. I was told that I dressed my dog up in baby clothes and stuck him in a clothing hamper. Toonie, my one and only dog. I remember swimming in Susan Rosenthal's pool and everyone never wanting to get out. And when I spoke with Susie a long time ago on the phone, she goes, "Yeah, you were a real fish. You never wanted to get out of the pool, and you were a great swimmer and all that stuff." I also remember we were all Girl Scouts, a bunch of us, and we went to Lazy J Ranch with the Girl Scouts, and we were assigned to work with animals to clean up for their cages, and we were told that if we took care of the rabbits and we got 10 points each day, that we'd be given a rabbit to take home. So there was only two girls in the beginning, so I convinced eight girls total to do it. And we won a rabbit. So ever since then, eight's been my lucky number, and eight means infinity. That was neat. That is a very strong memory. I started ballroom when I was really young, probably about 12 or 13. It's called social dancing now. Yes, and I loved that. Loved it. And I was good. Well, I went to a high school that was predominantly Jewish. It was just kind of understood that when there was a Jewish holiday, even though the school would be open, there would be very few people attending class, and everybody would be going to synagogue. When you're Orthodox, you walk when it's a high holiday, but we didn't walk because we were too far from the synagogue, so we drove our car there. Rosh Hashanah is first, which is the New Year, and then Yom Kippur, which is asking God to forgive you for your sins, is next. And those were really the only holidays where people didn't go to school because that was a biggie. Well, my parents died when I was 19, and I tell people 19 going on 12. My mom died of cancer. My dad had a heart attack. And so I thought God was punishing me. And I went to and lived in Israel in a kibbutz. God doesn't punish. It is what it is. It just happened. My mother got old and my dad had heart problems. But my mother was the glue that held the family together. She was the glue. When I moved off to San Diego for college, I wasn't around a Jewish community like I was when I grew up. There was a small Jewish community in San Diego. So I just gradually moved away from the environment of being around a lot of Jewish people. Not that much of a practicing Jew in San Diego. And in Texas, you're lucky if you run into a Jew once a month. So, it just gradually moved away from it, not just education-wise, but physically. I mean, this is a very small community of Jews here. I try to consider myself more spiritual than going to synagogue. Your mother is probably the closest person you're going to be with. At least that's what I've read. So when your mother dies, and maybe it's a father too, your developmental growth stops at that age. So even though I'm 65, in some ways I still have challenges navigating through difficulties in life. I've gotten a lot of help from outside people, counselors. I'll tell you freely, counseling's great. So I've developed tools on how to deal with challenges. Well, I was there twice. The first time I went and lived on it, well, both times I lived on a kibbutz.
But, what do you mean by both times? Explain
well,
that
when
further.
I first went over, I went to a kibbutz, which is a community where everybody works for the good of everyone else. And on a kibbutz, the kids don't live with their parents. They live in what's called Beit Yoladim, which is a children's home. And everybody has their own job. You can get up early in the morning and pick grapes. You can be cooking. You can clean the cafeteria. You can be a janitor. You can raise the kids. You can work in the crops. I mean, everybody has their own specialized job. And our kibbutz grew crops. I don't think we dealt with chickens or anything like that, but we would trade or sell our crops to one kibbutz, and then we would buy eggs, or it was a community. Then there's something called a moshav. You live with your children, from what I understand, or the kids live with the family, and it's not as much of a communal community, but it's still, everybody works for the good, but it's more independent. People live more independently. And don't quote me on this because I didn't go to Moshav. But when I went to Israel to, quote, find God and get away because I was dealing with depression and my parents dying. And so I went to kibbutz. And, 1 week I got up at the crack of dawn and then some, and either picked grapes or olives or did some kind of physical labor. And then had breakfast, but by then I was starving. And then we went back and did more working in the field. We used to have to quit by 10 because it was just so hot. And then I rested, and then after lunch I would go and do my Hebrew. And that was exhausting because by then I just wanted to go to sleep. In some ways it was easier to do Hebrew in the morning as far as focus, but then I would be exhausted working in the fields. The whole thing was exhausting. But it was a great experience, and I'd do it all over again. And the first time I was there, I met a girl from Switzerland named Margaret, and we became really good friends, and I ended up visiting her in Switzerland. That was a fun thing. And the second time I was there, I met a girl named Wilma, and we traveled all over Europe together. And I stayed there 3 or 4 months, And if I didn't come back at a certain time, I would not have been able to go to the fall semester. So after about 3 or 4 or 5 months, I came back to the States and got ready and went back to school. But then I had culture shock. I was talking in Hebrew. I'd be in the supermarket and say little Hebrew expressions. So then I went back for 1 semester, and then I dropped out of school and went back to Israel after about 6 months to a year, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to live there, and I just wasn't even interested in going to school at the time. I was still dealing with my parents, and I did a lot of traveling then. I had an experience in Germany that I can't remember who it was with. It might have been with my girlfriend Patty, and we got really late to the to where we were supposed to. We got off the underground of the bus. I can't recall, and we needed a place to stay, and it was very late. This man comes up to us. He goes, "Zimmer, Zimmer," which means room. So we go, "We need a room." So he takes us to this place in a little bitty room with 2 beds. And the way that worked was you were practically falling off one bed because it wasn't positioned properly. And we go inside and he locks the door. And there was bars on the window. It was really creepy. And we decided we were only going to stay there a night. I've been to Greece, France, Spain, Italy, England. I was 19 when I was in Greece. I think maybe it's Greek food that I like. So I had French, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. So in 9th grade, I got an A in French. In 10th grade, I got a B in French. In 11th grade, I got a C in French, and I quit because I could predict what 12th grade would be. So yes, I had a lot of French, but my French is practically forgotten.
So when you went to France and you spoke French, quote unquote,
yeah.
What was your experience like
when
with
you
that?
see, vous parlez français? Oh, mademoiselle. And then I say, je parle très bien français. Please, s'il vous plaît, parlez anglais avec moi. Please speak English. And then they try to do it because I make an effort. And when I lived in Israel, everyone said I spoke Hebrew with a French accent. Because I do.
So how is your Hebrew then?
Rama very bad. I met your father. Oh my goodness. It was November. It was a weekend after Thanksgiving in 1984. We met at a single non-smoking party.
And there was dancing, right?
Yes, there was dancing. He thought I was 17. What a sweet man he was.
What was he like?
Well, he was in the military. He had a mustache. He was a very sweet gentleman, and he said he liked to do theater, and that was very exciting to me. And I said, "You like to do theater?" And he goes, "Yes." And so that was very interesting. He was a nice guy. Well, we met in November of 84, and we got married in June of 88. So little over, over 3.5 years. We were in San Diego at this thing called the Cabrillo National Monument, which is where this guy named Cabrillo landed in San Diego. It's historical. And he went down on his knees and he proposed. And then I ran around like a fool. "Oh, I'm engaged! I'm engaged!" I was an older mommy. I was 41. It's exhausting. But I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. So I didn't have anybody to get feedback from when you were an infant about stuff. I relied on your grandma, and I have a degree in child development, so I used my knowledge with that, and then I joined a mother's group, but everybody was 10 to 15 years younger than me, and that was difficult because they were so young, and they were saddled with 3 or 4 kids and 25 years old and running around, and I was barely keeping up with a child, and I was 41 plus. I think the hardest thing was when you got older and I needed some advice on stuff. I wasn't young, and that was hard. I wanted to carry you and do and be, and when you're 41 and 42 and you got a baby, it's hard. The pro, I think, is that when you're older, you have more patience, and hopefully you have more knowledge, and I think I did. In fact, I know I did. And I think you're more open to getting information from other people and figuring out what works for you instead of saying, oh, no, this is the only way to do it. There's other ways to do things, and you got to find the thing that's best for you. So we're kinesthetic. Both can we learn by through movement. What else? What else? I think we both love to take pictures, and that's something I recognize that you liked it. I don't know if I influenced you in being a photography major, but I was always aware of you liking to take pictures.
When did I start really liking
Oh,
taking
honey, you've
pictures?
enjoyed taking pictures ever since you were little.
Oh, I don't remember
I
that.
always wanted to grab the camera and take a picture. Always, always,
Huh.
always, always. It started really big when you got your phones and started taking picture with your phone.
But didn't I like hate when people took pictures of me?
That's different. You didn't want your picture taken,
Yeah.
but you liked to take pictures, and you've always been very visual. It was a double-edged sword. I have my dogs because we live there, and I love my dogs. And I have the experience of rescuing dogs, which was absolutely wonderful. So we took the ferry from Antigua, where we stayed, where we lived and Dad worked, to Montserrat. And I think it was a 45-minute ferry. And Montserrat was the island that had Mount Soufriere, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it properly, that exploded. It erupted in the 95 or 96, and it buried well over one third of the island, the southern part. And Plymouth, which was the capital, was buried, and it's the dead zone. So when we got there, you could only go to certain parts of the island. So when we got there, we went up to a cab driver, and he said he would drive us around right along where the lava was to a house where all you could see was the roof. And then he took us to that couple. It was an older couple. One was a doctor, one was an attorney. They were asked to leave their home. They're written up in National Geographic. And they had a pool, and you were running around the pool saying, "Can I borrow some of your volcanic ash?" And they said, "You can take all you want." And that was really neat. And they were told to leave, and they didn't. And yeah, and I got really bad asthma because there was the the dome had fallen in, which is the top part of the volcano, which caused the ash to spread all over. And there was the one where there was one side where it was really a lot of ash and very bad for my asthma, and then there was a side that was better for me. But we went to Barbados, we went to St. Martin, we went to Martinique. Where else did we go? Puerto Rico. It was wonderful. It was great. I loved it. I'd like to relive my experiences with you as a mommy and go back in time and do that again. Goes too quick. Very quick. I'm very, very happy you're my daughter. I'm very. How many varies do we need? I'm blessed that you're my baby.